legal services is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms. People across Alabama are hurting. Elected leaders have bailed out corporations while sending only a one-time cash payment to working families despite record unemployment and a public health crisis. Hometown Action is fighting for working people across Alabama to build inclusive and sustainable small town and rural communities. Hometown Action demands that Congress pass a people's bailout that expands health care, sends cash payments to families, and invests in green jobs to restart the economy. Now is the time to act. Learn more at www.hometownaction.org.
Hey, you listen to conservative talk radio all week. Why don't you try something different for a change? The Majority Report with Sam Cedar is a 5-time award-winning daily left-wing political talk show. We go live every weekday at 11 a.m. Central Time on our YouTube channel. You can find it by searching for The Majority Report. We talk about the news, we take libertarian callers, we have debates, we interview guests on topics ranging from the post-Civil War Reconstruction era, child poverty, capitalism, the intellectual dark web, and more. And that's all just within the last month. If you want to hear what smart, progressive political talk that is occasionally amusing sounds like, then you need to tune in. And you're always welcome to call in if you want to hear the correct opinion on any given topic. I will give it to you. Tune in to the Majority Report at 11 a.m. Central Time on YouTube or later wherever you get your podcasts.
WVNN. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
The time has come for America to hear the truth.
We are going to stand with them, and not only are we going to fight for their rights, but we're going to stand up for our rights here in our state, in our homes, and in our community. Because the future of labor's rights in the United States of America is not going to be decided in the courts. It's not going to be decided in Congress. It's not going to be decided on talk radio, and it sure is not going to be decided on Fox News.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
Good morning, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, David Story. It is Saturday, February 13th, 2021, and we are broadcasting live online and on the radio on WVNN in the Huntsville, Decatur, Athens listening area from Athens, Alabama. A recording of this program will play tomorrow, Sunday, February 14th, 2021, on the great WGOL in Russellville, Alabama. Today we are talking to Jonah Furman. He did labor organizing for Bernie Sanders and AOC, and now has a very nerdy labor newsletter. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be going through bills that have that are being pushed through the Alabama State Legislature and more on today's Valley Labor Report. So thanks for tuning in, folks. We appreciate your time. If you want to see what we're up to throughout the week, get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you should follow us on social media. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Valley Labor Report. We're on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. David is on Twitter at Radical Unionist. That's spelled RADICL Unionist. If you missed part of the show and want to go back and watch it later, you can search YouTube for the Valley Labor Report and subscribe to our channel. You can go back and watch the full show there, and we clip segments throughout the week. That way, if there's just one thing that you were interested in, you can watch that without having to watch the whole show. We do upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps. So to see if we are on your listening platform of choice, you can go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. We have a website, thevalleylaborreport.org. And if you appreciate our work and want to help us stay on the air, consider throwing us a couple dollars a month on patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. And one more thing before we get started to the show, the North Alabama DSA has a necessities drive every Saturday at the IBEW Union Hall on Clinton Avenue across from Campus 805 and Yellowhammer Brewing from 3 to 5 p.m. this Saturday and every Saturday. So bring PPE, blankets, clothes, non-perishable food items to the North Alabama DSA's Necessities Drive this Saturday and every Saturday from 3 to 5 p.m. at the IBEW Union Hall on Clinton Avenue. The donations will be sent to the Manor House. So today we are talking to Jonah Furman. He previously worked in labor organizing for Bernie Sanders and AOC. We're going to be talking to him about his new newsletter. Jonah, thanks for talking to us. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. Great show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So, Jonah, tell us about your newsletter. What are you trying to do in this new newsletter?
Sure, yeah. Just started in earnest this year. It's called whogetsthebird.substack.com is where you can subscribe to it for free or chip in. It's, the hope is basically to do two things. One is to keep an eye on the actually existing labor movement. There used to be in this country a robust labor press. Things would, big union conventions would be front page news in national newspapers. Local union activity would be front page news in local news. There would be union papers in different industries, different shops. Big factories would have their own paper. States would have their statewide labor paper written by, union members and organizers and things like that. So to some extent, I'm just trying to track all the stuff that I track personally of what's going on in the U.S. labor movement that's not being tracked anymore, and share it out and have people keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening. I feel like a lot of our labor writing or, academia, it's history, right? We talk about things that happened 50 years ago or more, and there's very little sense of what's happening this week, this month. And the other part of it is, so I post these weekly updates that are, too ambitious. We try and put in everything that has happened that week in terms of union organizing in the U.S., but also work on longer form essays, critical views, things like that. I think another thing we've missed because we've lost this labor press, and all of this is somewhat downstream from losing, a big labor movement, is we've lost people talking about what should the labor movement be doing, or what's changed, or what did it used to be like, or what are the actual existing tensions? We all know we're all pro-union, and it's an extremely, obviously pro-union newsletter I put out, but it's not enough to just cheer on the union. Obviously, things haven't been going great for, depending how you count it, 40 years for the U.S. labor movement. And I think getting a little more deep into that with examples that aren't historical but are contemporary is really key for anybody who wants to organize or even just understand what's going on with the unions today, whether you are a union worker, you want to organize a union at your place of work, or you're a political operative. Wherever you are on that spectrum, if you don't understand what's going on in the labor movement today, I don't think you have much of a chance of intervening in any way, whether that's locally or on a national scale.
Right. And you said that you're trying to track what's going on. What are the things that you bring out in your newsletter?
Yeah, so these weekly updates really are, I lead heavily with new organizing, and that's partly just my opinion on what has to happen in the labor movement, right? Like, if we're not organizing new shops, you can do the math however you want, but for example, in 2020, we lost 323,000 union jobs, and in January of this year, through new organizing, we organized something like 2,000 new union jobs. Mm-hmm. So if you do the math, we're going to zero, and we've been going to zero slowly. So I lead with new organizing, which means I try and do a comprehensive list of every new shop that's filed for an election with the Labor Relations Board, in the private sector. These are shops across the country, from 2 workers working as mechanics to 200 workers in a white-collar legal firm, whoever it is, all over, every union. And I also track, votes that happen. So with the NLRB, you might know, you file for an election. 6 weeks later, if you're lucky, you get a vote. Usually it's more like a couple months, and sometimes it's years. So just tracking that is a project in itself. And then besides that is trying to get people a feel for what's going on in local unions across the country. So in our labor movement as it exists, every union puts out a national press release each week on some piece of legislation or something that happened in the news, or they're weighing in some way. But to get the real flavor of what's going on in the labor movement on the ground floor where there's actual workers participating, as opposed to kind of, people writing press releases, which are useful, but don't give you the real flavor. You kind of just have to keep your eye on local news across the country. So there's more than you realize. There's strike authorization votes happening here and there. This week, just off the top of my head, we're looking at 700 truck drivers in Arizona have authorized a strike for a grocery distributor there. Hundreds of nurses in Massachusetts are talking about a strike authorization. Last week, there was a small school district outside Pittsburgh that was on strike. They went back to work without a contract. Things like this, if you don't know that that's happening or you can't track that that's going on, it's really hard to get a sense beyond, national headlines of what is the labor movement. So we're all watching Amazon in Alabama, following every twist and turn, and I love it. I love that the New York Times is writing about it, but they're not writing about, thousands of other workers who are taking action and whose lives are being transformed by the labor movement in real time, and it's just being missed on a national level because it's all local stories.
It's interesting, John. This is David. Good morning, Jonah. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you say about the New York Times writing about it, and of course, writing about Amazon and not so much everything else. And that's kind of, me growing up in like the underground metal and punk scene. I kind of look at make that the two combined. In other words, when I was growing up, this whole underground scene, everybody that was in the scene knew about it, and we had people that wrote little articles and passed out flyers and things like that. And I'm looking at the labor movement now, and specifically like your newsletter and like Strike Wave that publishes a lot of things, and we all know about those things, but it's almost like this underground scene of my teenage years. Everybody that I follow you follow me, Kim Kelly, all the brothers and sisters in the labor movement, but it's not getting any mainstream traction. And I wonder, and you may not be the person to answer this, but I'm going to ask the question anyways. If you could speak to what do we have to do? I mean, like you said at the beginning, a lot of the major newspapers and some of the minor ones, 40 years ago had an entire section devoted to organized labor, and it's moved. And I know a lot of it's because the internet has taken those funds out of the print media. But we've got to do something, and I don't know exactly what we've got to do, because I feel like a lot of the reason, not a lot, but a portion of the reason the labor movement is not moving forward is because nobody covers it in mainstream media whatsoever. What do you think, in your opinion? I mean, like I say, your newsletter, your Substack is absolutely amazing. It's data driven. It's very intellectually written, but I mean, and not a knock on you, but there's no way for you to get that out to everybody that really needs to see it.
Right. I mean, well, I'll say this. The New York Times was not writing about, the Auto Workers Convention in the 40s because they were such fans of labor.
Exactly.
It's because they were a threat. So, not even a threat, a social force, right? So to even soften it, it's not even that conspiratorial. It's just, it mattered to people because the unions were powerful. So to some extent, I'm like, this is such a frustrating answer, and it's what everything boils down to in the labor movement, as you say, until we got the power back, there's not much we can do about these, secondary effects like losing the labor press. But I think it's a chicken and the egg for sure. I think people think there's no labor movement. And I also think that people who want there to be a labor movement, whether you're a local union member or a national leader, don't really have this holistic sense of what's going on in the labor movement. There's kind of a broad strokes kind of thing of, NAFTA, we lost jobs, then it became a service economy, and now it's like all downhill, and we're just managing as we can, right? Or we're waiting for labor law to change or something like that. But until we get to big fights that matter to people. I mean, why is the Times covering Amazon? It's because it would really matter. And and because Amazon's scared, and because Alabama's really interesting for people who think that it's like there's no unions there, right? Or no union members or no workers who fight back there. So part of it is just, it's hard for me to it's an excuse, but it's true. Like the papers covered this stuff when it was a threat,
when we had the power.
Yeah, exactly.
Jonah, I think that is a fantastic segue into what I was talking to you about on the road in this morning. David and I are more or less kind of the opinion that unions need to shift their PAC funding, which are not union dues, and we need to make that clear. But we're kind of the opinion that we need to shift that funding model to organizing and marketing for unions, not for politicians. And so I think that's a really good segue into like, how do we build power? What happens to our money when we donate it to politicians? We're going to talk about that on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. This is the Valley Labor Report.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time, but the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maple, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtandj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
All workers deserve fair wages, affordable health care, and a retirement plan that enables them to retire with dignity. All workers deserve to have a say about the terms and conditions of their employment, not just the bosses. With the Machinist Union's over 600,000 members having our back, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama has been serving workers' interests for over 20 years. Our members have the best health insurance in the area with zero deductible plans. We set the bar for pay in the area with over $40 an hour rates, consistently averaging the highest non-college degree jobs in North Alabama with some of the best retirement plans in the industry. We can do the same for you. Together, we remain united, raising our voices to ensure justice on the job and service in the community. The Machinist Union is a true Southern union founded in Atlanta in 1888. We have been serving members' needs for 132 years. The longevity of our union proves our dedication and loyalty to the working class. The Machinist Union isn't just for machinists. We represent workers in government, healthcare, auto workers, aerospace workers, transportation workers, the defense industry, and woodworking. Our members even build the iconic Harley-Davidson motorcycles. If you're ready to get serious about better benefits and wages, if you want to have a voice in your workplace with over 600,000 members to back you up, call or email us today at 256-286-3704 or organize at iamaw44.org.
Here in Huntsville, federal employees are an invaluable part of the nation's defense, offering unmatched expertise in engineering and technology and as stewards of taxpayer dollars. What we ask for in return is to be treated with fairness, dignity, and respect. The American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, Local 1858, is a union of working people looking out for each other, making sure that we're treated right. To inquire about joining or to learn more, call 256-876-4880.
Hey y'all, are you tired of hearing that the South is just a bunch of racist rednecks? Or tune in to Dixieland of the Proletariat podcast. We talk about Southern working class history and current events through a leftist perspective. Join Nelson, Senior Telecommunications Director Tommy, Comrade Kate, former pig farmer Tyler, and Brother William, wherever you stream your podcast. And good Lord willing, the creek don't rise. We'll see y'all next time. It's Dixieland of the Proletariat, y'all.
WVNN. Depend on it.
Welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host David Story. On the line we have Jonah Furman. He is the author of an excellent newsletter about what is happening in today's labor movement called Who Gets the Bird? You can find it on Substack.com. And where we left off, David asked him what he thought it's going to take to get mainstream media coverage of the labor movement, and Jonah more or less said, well, we need a bigger labor movement. We need to be more powerful. And I think that's a really good segue, because David and I, something that we've been talking about on and off the air is how much money unions funnel to Democratic Party PACs and to politicians and things like that. And every time I say this, I want to make it crystal clear. These are not union dues. These are funds that members voluntarily donate, knowing that it will go to politicians. So there's a thing about, they know what's happening with this money. It is not a condition of membership in any union across the country, but we do. We ask our members to donate to these PACs, and and unions have donated hundreds of millions of dollars to politicians just across the last 10 years.
But it's also important to point out that not only, for ours, we have the Machinist Nonpartisan Political League. Not only is that going to campaigns, but it also funds lobbyists. It pays for me to go to D.C. and make sure that my members are represented in D.C. as well.
Yeah.
So,
and
just don't think of it as just, we're just helping politicians get elected, because once they get elected, we're holding their feet to the fire as well, making sure that they do the promises that they made to us.
Yeah, and that's another. I think that's important, and that's good. But hundreds of millions of dollars have specifically just gone to campaign donations and for political campaigns, and so
putting boots on the ground in Georgia.
Yeah, and putting boots on the ground in Georgia, and so David and I have more or less kind of come to the opinion that the labor movement would be better off. Within ourselves and electorally, we would be a better electoral force if, instead of putting all that money into political campaigns, we had invested that in organizing and marketing for the union and putting boots on the ground. Instead of knocking doors for Warnock and Ossoff, we put boots on the ground, knocking the doors on these Amazon workers on these Amazon workers' houses, or making calls, or like meeting people and organizing new shops and things like that. And you're an interesting person to get your take on this, because you're a political guy. You were the labor, or you were asking unions to do this, for Bernie and AOC, more or less. And so, what is your kind of take on unions in the partisan political process? How do you feel about that?
It's a great question. I think I would say, to back up, there is this idea in the U.S. labor movement that, we shouldn't rely on politicians, right? And sometimes this turns into a strategy saying we shouldn't do political action. We should do, the union should organize at the workplace. We'll grow strong enough. That's where the strength is. If we build the power there, it'll overflow into the rest of society, into the rest of politics and things like that. I just want to push back on that, because we're starting in a very strange place in this story that we're telling about political action and unions, right? So most countries that have, a capitalist society have the Industrial Revolution more or less around the same time that the U.S. did, give or take some decades. They formed labor parties, right? So they had unions of workers who were fighting for something in the workplace. They realized they weren't going to get there with just a fight here against my boss, or even here in my industry. We needed something to legislate. The state had to step in on certain issues. And we did that here, right? That's what some of the New Deal era stuff was, when we invented a minimum wage, when we invented, limits on working hours, when we, legislated how unions can be formed. So I think we have an American tendency to say this political stuff of giving a bunch of money to politicians has failed, hasn't gotten us anywhere. Unions shouldn't be doing political work. We should be doing organizing work. The answer, which is less satisfying, is we have to do both. But the political system of how unions operate is extremely broken. That is undeniable. 100% agree with you. Unions throw money at politicians who really get no return on that in a lot of cases. In the best cases, they play defense, right? They say, well, we denied a majority to the state legislature in this state, so it's not going to go right to work this session. It's very limited, and to call those victories is, you're really lowering the sights of what union political action can be. So I think you're totally right to call out, these contributions, whether those contributions would be better off going to organizing. I mean, there's no question we need to invest much more in organizing. Should it come from political contributions? I'm open to it. I don't think those political contributions have gone very far. I will say the work that I did with AOC and Bernie is interesting because for the most part, these are campaigns that do not need union institutional money. We're getting union member money, right? People are giving $27 at a time. And if you look at any part of the workforce or any union, there were surveys done, but it looks, basically like the membership is donating to the campaign. So whether the official campaign wants to chip in $1,000 compared to the millions of their members who are just chipping in $5, it's really not of concern structurally to the campaign, right? So that's, and part of the different model here is that I think because we've come so backwards to political action from our union movement, because for a century, the union movement hasn't done anything politically independent of the status quo of the Democratic Party. I mean, and again, to go into this, why this matters is you wouldn't be in a union with your boss, right? So why are you in a party with your boss? Not even as a moral thing, just strategically, it's a problem because when your interests conflict with the interests of your boss, who has more money in the party, you're going to lose that fight, right? So whether it's about we want the minimum wage to go higher, but in my party is someone who would lose money because they own a big company, right, if the minimum wage goes up. So suddenly you're going toe-to-toe with your boss on political action inside your party, which is just, this is just not a political strategy. But I'll just say, I think these progressive campaigns that have kind of cropped up are this interesting backdoor into union political action that is what I've been trying to explore for, over the past year especially, is like, these are poles of attraction for union members. They're excited about these politics, about Bernie, about AOC, they're giving money. We see that. They're knocking doors. They're volunteering all the time. And that's how I met David, right? Like, I see this has an energy that the union's political program doesn't have. So can we use these political grassroots movements to find a backdoor into the union politics and say, here's what the union should be doing. Do what Bernie's doing. Your members like it, so let's keep doing that, right? So I think there's an interplay here. I totally agree. I mean, you look at some of the spending and it's just not worth what you've paid. Yeah. So, yes.
Well, one of the things, and we've got just a few seconds left, but I want to touch on that point, is one of the things that we really need to do, or that the Democratic Party really needs to do, is come back to the labor movement, because what you see with Bernie, like such as myself and such as yourself, is union members that are actively getting involved and making those calls for him out of the love, because they see where he's benefited us and where he can benefit us, as opposed to most of your liberals in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, we're going to be talking to some more to Jonah Furman some more on the other side. Stay tuned.
Huntsville's #1 news, talk, and weather station. WVNN Athens. WVNN FM Trinity. A Cumulus station. It's 10 o'clock.
From ABC News, I'm Brian Clark. The Senate impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump has taken an unexpected turn. The Senate has voted to consider witness testimony. That followed a request from the lead impeachment manager, Congressman Jamie Raskin. He says they want to hear from a Republican member of Congress.
We would like the opportunity to subpoena Congresswoman Herrera regarding her communications with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, and to subpoena her contemporaneous notes that she made regarding what President Trump told Kevin McCarthy in the middle of the insurrection.
That's Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler, a Republican from Washington State who voted to impeach the president. ABC's Rachel Scott has more.
A source familiar telling ABC News Republican leader Kevin McCarthy and Donald Trump got into a shouting match as the insurrection was unfolding. The source says McCarthy was on the phone with Trump, pleading with him to tell his supporters to stand down, telling him he heard gunfire outside the House chamber. But Trump allegedly responded, "Well, Kevin, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are."
President's lawyer Michael Vanderveen said,
"I'm going to need at least over 100 depositions, not just one."
It was thought the trial may even conclude today, especially after Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said he would vote to acquit the former president for incitement of insurrection. Elsewhere, the Biden administration Friday released guidelines on how to safely reopen schools. It's a color-coded system, and ABC's Alex Prochet says there are other issues
sent out.
Along with this guidance is a new handbook from the Department of Education, but CDC Director Rochelle Walensky says that these are suggestions and won't be used to shut down schools who don't follow the guidelines.
There's no levels of elevated radiation and no tsunami threat after a massive earthquake struck off northeast Japan. You're listening to ABC News.
Have you heard? A secret hoard of 1888 Morgan silver dollars has been found. These gorgeous 1888 O Morgans are as bright and shiny as the day they were struck. And less than 500 of these coins are available. Coin experts are calling the Great Southern Treasury Hoard an incredible opportunity. Just call GovMint at 1-800-719-9079 and you are guaranteed a mint condition 1888 Morgan silver dollar featuring the iconic O mint mark of the New Orleans Mint. These 132-year-old coins were found in sealed bags, been untouched since 1888. That makes these unopened bags of Morgan silver dollars extremely rare. To learn more, call 1-800-719-9079. Call now and you'll receive a free American Coin Collector's Bonus Package, a $10 value, free with every order. Call 1-800-719-9079 now to secure your 1888 O Morgan silver dollar coins before they sell out. That's 1-800-719-9079.
Hey y'all. Are you tired of hearing that the South is just a bunch of racist rednecks? Or tune in to Dixieland of the Proletariat podcast. We talk about Southern working class history and current events through a leftist perspective. Join Nelson, Senior Telecommunications Director Tommy, Comrade Kate, former pig farmer Tyler, and Brother William, wherever you stream your podcast. And good Lord willing and the creek don't rise, we'll see y'all next time. It's Dixieland of the Proletariat, y'all.
News Talk 770 AM, 92.5 FM, WVNN.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host David Story. On the line, we've got Jonah Furman. He has done labor organizing for Bernie Sanders and AOC, and now he has a fantastic, very nerdy labor newsletter about the things happening in the labor movement today. You can find that at Who Gets the Bird on Substack.com. Very good stuff. Very good stuff. We've been talking about the interplay between unions and electoral politics, and I think Jonah, you're making a very kind of smart distinction there. Something that you mentioned that I'm interested in your thoughts on is that you said that in other countries in the Western world there have been created actual quote-unquote labor parties, whereas we don't have that in the labor or in America right now. We don't have a labor party. We have the Democratic Party where we've got workers and bosses in the same party. But I mean, hasn't the same thing happened in these other parties? When you look at the Labor Party in Britain, I mean, bosses are in the Labor Party in Britain, right? I mean, the Labor Party in Britain and the Democratic Party in the U.S. and a lot of these other quote-unquote labor parties in the Western world followed more or less the same track as the Democratic Party did. When the Democratic Party was more pro-worker, they were more pro-worker, and when the Democratic Party went into the neoliberal decline, they did as well. You know, Tony Blair was just as bad as Bill Clinton, from what I understand. And so is the fact that there are parties that are called labor parties in other Western countries, is that really like such an important distinction, you think?
I think it is. I mean, I totally agree with you. It's hard to, the turn to the right in these parties is overdetermined, right? So there's plenty of factors that you could blame it on, and they all happened at once across the Western industrial world. There was recessions that happened on a basically global level. There was the third world debt crisis. There's things that happened that moved these parties to the right. But it's not the case to say that the Labor Party in the UK and the Democratic Party in the US are the same. It matters that the Labor Party really was formed as a Labor Party. It was a workers' party that split off from the Liberal Party in the late 1800s, early 1900s in the UK. Yes, they've gone further to the right, and Corbyn is like, Bernie Sanders trying to contest that party's political orientation. But there's, first of all, structural differences. So things like in the Labor Party, there's actual membership and people have votes, and the unions have votes, and the members of those unions vote on how those unions should operate within the party. So there is a lot more of a mechanism there to control or to be responsive to, at least to the membership. But in the U.S., we never had that. And that, there's plenty of things you could point to say, why don't we have a real welfare state here? But it's not like the UK and the U.S. are the same in terms of regular workers and how bad it gets for people and how good it can get for people, right? Like, they have a national health system. We have, nothing, let alone doctors and nurses who are employed by the government and give you free health care. We don't even we can barely get the government to cover your health care costs if that's, if you need to use health care, which God forbid in this country. So, I don't think it's the same to say they've all gone to the right, so they're all the same. I think it's a very different world in which, we use the term PAC, right? The super PAC and PAC. The first political action committee, that was an actual project launched by the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, in the 30s by John Lewis, who, is the namesake of my newsletter. This was a real project, a real moment when labor almost did split off from the Democratic Party, and in a lot of ways it was the New Deal that kept labor in the Democratic Party. I think if that had happened, now we're talking ancient history, but if that had happened, we'd be talking about a much different political system today, right? You would have a party who sees its interest as advocating for and solely for workers' rights and, the interests of the working class, as opposed to a cross-class collaboration party that, no one can really tell you what the Democratic Party is about. Same with the Republican Party, but certainly not for the Democratic Party. What is this party representing? Labor parties, in all their flaws, actually structurally are much more forced to represent the interests of the institutions of workers. They're super flawed. They don't always, the punchline is not what you want to hear all the time. And they're subject to the same forces that, any political party is subject to in terms of the global economy, wars abroad, things that happen to every political party. But I would say, if we had a Labor Party that was as bad as the Democratic Party, I would still think we're ahead of where we are, because at least you have a structure to intervene in, right? You have something that's a little more clear that you can participate in. It's very unclear how workers are supposed to change the direction of the Democratic Party today. It's a lot more difficult than a Labor Party that's just misguided.
And it's probably important to point out, that when you bring up the New Deal and the things that happened during that time, is the fact that a lot of no one ever recognizes Eugene Debs running in the Socialist Party and pulling the Democratic Party farther left, for I think it was four presidential cycles he ran, and the last time he ran from prison, so there was definitely a pull on the Democratic Party to the left. But also there's going to be people, especially people that I'm friends with, that are far left, that are going to think, and I want to make it very clear, I'm no supporter. When we're talking about a new Labor Party, I'm no supporter of the People's Party as it's trying to be done right now. I swear to God, somebody is going to watch this on YouTube and be like, oh, they're pimping for the People's Party. Now, I have an utmost respect for several of the people that have kind of aligned themselves with that. Dr. Cornel West being one of them, but what some of their lunatical fringe followers are doing is insane. So just I wanted to point that out before we got any farther.
Yeah, well, so I think that's a good. How do you see the mechanism to go forward? And I think you convinced me. I think that was. I think, Jonah, you're very effective, and you're very effective rhetorically. So what's the path forward towards getting a more labor-oriented political party? Do you think? Obviously, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is the DSA, and like parasitically using the Democratic Party ballot line, and then once they get enough power, then breaking off. But I don't. What are your thoughts?
It's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of this conversation is crystal ball stuff, which, I understand why people want to prognosticate and guess about what the future is going to be and be ready for it. I don't think we know in terms of how this will happen. I do know. I basically think we're on the right track in terms of contesting this power, and we should have been doing it. I wish that, generations before us had been on this same track. I think the third party thing is a dead end, and it's not, I don't have abstract reasons for that. It's just look at every third party that's ever tried to do it. Look at what Bernie just did in 2 presidential runs, and essentially created a magnetic pole around which a new movement could be built, and it worked, right? It didn't work. It hasn't always worked, but I think you saw dynamics about that, the same type of thing in the 80s with Jesse Jackson's runs in the Democratic Party. And I think that's essentially where we need to go. I don't know if that means eventually, it's something besides the Democratic Party that you put on your driver's license at the DMV, or if it's, just called the Democratic Party and it's unrecognizable. I don't think that's not really interesting to me, because it's just kind of like guesswork, right? But I do think the reason to be in the Democratic Party is the same reason to stay in your union and to be active in your union. Why? It's because this is where working people are collected right now politically in the U.S., which is very few places, right? I mean, we are in a society that has social institutions have largely fissured, fallen apart. People, there's the book, Bowling Alone. There's like all these studies of this stuff, and people don't do group activity anymore, right? And certainly not group activity with any political character, and certainly not any political activity with a class character. So unions and the Democratic Party really still are where people of color are gathered in, supermajorities. Working class people are gathered in supermajorities. There's a lot to be said about the working class people in the Republican Party, and especially working class people who don't vote at all. But if you look at the numbers, I mean, there's still millions and millions of workers in the Democratic Party who are going to vote blue, because they know that between these two terrible parties, the Democratic Party is, going to occasionally play defense, if not ever play offense, right? So, and the same is true for the unions, right? We know that the unions, as imperfect as they might be, if I'm upset with my union, whatever it is, it's the only thing that gathers working people together on the basis of being workers and brings new people in, right? Because when you go to work and there's a union at the workplace, it doesn't matter what your politics are, you suddenly have to think about, do I want to be part of the union? Do I want to be active in the union? Do I want to, build collective power against the interests of my boss? That's an incredibly powerful experience. So in terms of talking about a new ballot line or a new party, I think I don't know how you look at the past 5 years and don't feel like we're going in the right direction. That's one of the things that's hard for me to look at the People's Party stuff and some of the really critical anti-AOC stuff is just like, look, man, there was no left movement 10 years ago in this country to speak of. Now we have millions of regular people who know what democratic socialism is, who know what a union is, right? Who didn't know it before. So I feel like we want to keep going where the people are. If the people go into a third party, then we should go with them into a third party. I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't think there's any reason for us to make plans to do that. I think the people, if you look at exit polls, you look at stats, they're still voting Democrat. They're listening. They want to know, who's going to run against Donald Trump. That's why it was important to be part of that. And I think it's going to be important to keep doing that. We're going to have a Democratic Socialist run for president in 2024, whether we think it's a good idea or not, or that's how we want to spend our energy. Like it or not, that's where regular people look at for politics. Same with your union, right? People care about their wages, their health care, bread and butter stuff. Even if you're not interested, it's your job as someone who wants to make change in the world to meet those people where they're at. Where they're at is they're talking about, my boss is getting on me for coming in 2 minutes late to work. So you got to fight that fight with them. That's where the fight is, because that's where the people are. So that's my take on the third party stuff. I think it's a lot of navel gazing for the most part. And for the most part, just keep going where the people are. And that's the Democratic Party. And you just got to suck it up and get your hands dirty. It's okay.
Yeah. It's almost like they're trying to derail the good work that's been done through Justice Democrats, through DSA, and organizations like that, like you said, where we have seen them push the Democratic Party farther left than we've seen in the past. Decades, my past lifetime.
Yeah.
So they're doing good work. We've just got to keep supporting them.
Yeah, we're going to have one more segment with Jonah Furman on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time, but the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maple, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtandj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by listeners like you. If you value the work that we are doing, injecting a different perspective into talk radio, and you have the means, consider signing up for a monthly donation on patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. Again, that's patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report to support our work and keep us on the air. If you're looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334. That's 256-383-3334, or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
770 AM, 92.5 FM, WVNN. Depend on it.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host David Story. On the line, we have Jonah Furman. He is the author of a fantastic newsletter, Who Gets the Bird, on Substack.com. He was previously in labor organizing for Bernie Sanders and AOC. I've just got one more question for him, unless you have anything else that you want to talk about. If anybody wants to call in, 1-866-494-9866. Again, that is 1-866-494-9866. So, Jonah, my question is, we've been, I completely agreed with your analysis. I've always thought that, third parties are kind of silly insofar as they exist right now. Some of the conversation today has been kind of pessimistic. You do a newsletter of every week about what's going on in the labor movement today. What is the most optimistic thing or things that you're looking at as you're writing your newsletter?
And you can't say Amazon.
I can't say. I'm sorry, guys. You guys are in the spotlight right now. Amazon is the most exciting thing, but we can talk about other things too. I mean, I think 2 things are what I'm looking for, and I can give examples of this as I did a little bit earlier. One is strike activity, and strike activity is so important for a few reasons, but to me, it's not the reason most people think. I think the reason strike activity is so important is because the labor movement collects regular, apolitical people who just have a job, right? You find yourself in this job and suddenly you're in this union situation, whether you're organizing a new union or you find there's a union at work and you're trying to navigate, how does the union set priorities and things like that. These apolitical people are transformed by strikes. I mean, you see this win or loss, right? Like going through a strike experience is something that no other political experience in our kind of U.S. vocabulary holds a candle to being on a picket line as a striking worker. And I've never been on strike myself, so I can't even speak from personal experience, but from talking to workers who 30 years ago went on a strike and changed forever how they view power, how they view their union, how they view collectivism in general. I mean, this is how political change happens, is by people experiencing things like huge strikes. So that to me is always really exciting, and it's always happening. I mean, it's happening at a tiny scale if you look at anything historical. So last year tied for the lowest in recorded history of strikes over 1,000 people in the U.S. So we really still are at the bottom of the barrel. We have the teacher strike wave that was really exciting for a couple years, that really did represent an uptick in the past 30, 35 years, but we're really still at the bottom here, especially looking at last year's numbers. But things like, you know, like I said earlier, I just got a notification that 800 nurses just authorized a strike in Massachusetts, 700 truck drivers in Arizona authorized a strike, teachers outside Pittsburgh just came back from a strike. We have 200 Teamster brothers and sisters in Minneapolis who are on strike. They're actually locked out now after 3 weeks. This stuff is really, you know, why I keep looking for this, to see if, you know, one of those Teamster brothers in Minnesota is having this transformative experience, and who knows what that means for that local union, for politics in that city, in that state, and the knock-on effects that we can watch for. The other thing that I look for the most is actually, you know, I mean, it's related to Amazon, but it's organizing in core industries. And this is something I don't think we talk about enough, right? We talk about new organizing like we want just more union members, which we do. But what we really, really want is to build density in core industries for core unions that raises standards in a competitive industry, right? So it's actually different to organize 20 workers at a nonprofit than it is to organize 20 workers in the freight industry by the Teamsters that are trying to drive up standards in that industry wide. So one of the things I look at Amazon for is, it's amazing that there's this Alabama warehouse. What really matters, I mean, it matters if these workers win, of course, for these individual workers and for the labor movement as a whole. But what really matters is when we start talking about a national or regional agreement or standards that start going up for Amazon workers in general, warehouse workers in general, logistics workers in general. That's when you start talking about, you know, that's when the New York Times puts it on the front page, right? And right now it'll be in the business section. When there's a national agreement that raises the wage at Amazon, you're talking about, that's what we saw in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. The National Master Freight Agreement in the 60s covered 550,000 truck drivers under one contract. I mean, that level of industrial fight back is really what we're looking for. So when I see things like, you know, last week a new election was filed at an aerospace manufacturer for 300 workers in Indiana from, I think it was the steelworkers or the machinists. That's the stuff you like to see, right? You're like, this union is building back its power in its core industry that's going to meaningfully drive up standards for everyone in that industry. So even, you know, the digital media unionization wave that we're seeing is really interesting to watch, because it's going to change digital media forever. And that's going to have effects in our society because it's built density and changed an entire industry. So those are kind of the two things I look at, is strikes and industrial organizing in the sense of building density in core industries for core unions.
It's interesting, and Jacob said that was the last question, but I thought up another one when you were bringing this up, because I think it's important, and I think it's important for all of our brothers and sisters out there for something to be considering, because what we're seeing is great leaders like Cooper Caraway coming up, and what you're talking about is sectoral bargaining. You know, now you didn't specifically say that, but that's kind of when you say you're wanting to see these specific types of industries building that power industry-wide. What do you think? Because here's the thing. When I bring up sectoral bargaining, most members, even very good members that I'm friends with, their eyes glaze over. They have no clue, you know, but I think that's the next big push that we should be seeing, not only from the AFL-CIO, but also in our international and national unions. And what are your thoughts on that, as far as how can we open that discussion up more? Because it's definitely not happening other than in a few radical labor leaders that I follow.
It's a great question. It's actually something I've been thinking a lot about, because there's some folks in the labor movement who are talking now about sectoral bargaining, actually in response to Proposition 22 in California, and some signs, I mean, it looks pretty good, but signs from the Biden administration that they're in conversation with Uber and gig working platforms that are talking about kind of sectoral bargaining from the wrong direction. So I think sectoral bargaining is a key conversation for us to have, but like a third party, there's kind of the good version and the dead end version. And of course, because this is all kind of symptomatic of the power of the labor movement, the version that's on the table seriously in kind of the halls of power right now is a scary version where Uber says, okay, yeah, the sector has these rates, right? And you can have worker representatives go to the table, say, we should talk about, what should conditions look like in this industry? But if you don't have workers behind you ready to take action, you're coming to the table with nothing, right? So you can say, we want this, this, and this, and Uber says, you and what army, right? So I think sectoral bargaining is definitely the horizon. I think if you look at the U.S. labor movement, we think of it as a firm by firm, company by company bargaining a scheme, and it is, but at its best, like when I talk about the National Master Freight Agreement, you approach sectoral bargaining in those conversations. So for people who don't know sectoral bargaining, just to make it clear, you have FedEx is bargaining with its employees, UPS is bargaining with its employees. Why not just have a scheme where everyone who does similar kind of work or is in a similar industry has one contract? And usually in European countries where this happens, the state has some role to play, saying bringing all the people to the table together and mediating the conversation in some way. The problem is, just like a third party here or a labor party in Western Europe, those were built out of strength. We're talking now about sectoral bargaining that would be built out of weakness. And that's actually scary to me when you have, the industry coming to the table and the workers just not being there. They're bargaining with themselves. They're with a little help from the government, right? So they say, here's what industry standards should be. And there's no one on the other side to say, actually, that's not, that doesn't match what our workers actually care about or need.
And that doesn't match what our workers care about or need, and our workers won't accept it. That's the important thing. Like you said, if you say that's not what our workers care about or need and you're not organized, they'll say, well, I don't care. But if you've got people willing to go out on strike, people willing to stand up and say, no, I won't accept this, and I've got the power to say no, then that's a different scenario. David, you were saying something.
Well, I was just going to say, the reason that I bring it up and the reason that I think it's so important is because I worked in Germany for several years. And I see, and I don't care what anybody says, until you've worked in Germany and recognize the power of their labor unions and their sectorial bargaining, it is night and day difference between the power that we have. And I think if we're going to, and the reason that I brought it up is I think if we're going to start making those pushes, we need to look into France and Germany and those places where you see truck drivers actually stop in the middle of the interstate whenever they call for a strike and walk off and leave the goods sitting there. That is where you have the leverage, not just over industry, but over the entire country. Politicians take notice, industry takes notice, and they get what they want. The Yellow Vest movement is a perfect example of that in France the past year.
Right.
Yeah, totally agreed. I mean, I think the main thing is it's hard because I want people to think about worker power always has to be there. Anything you're talking about political changes or how the union should operate, it's all about worker power is a necessary component, but you also can't lose sight of the big picture sectoral bargaining type stuff, right? We need people who are capable of both thinking about we need to build shop floor power, but we also are talking about big picture political questions.
Yeah. Jonah, where can people find you?
Who Gets the Bird, just like it sounds, .substack.com. I'm also on Twitter. You can find me, Jonah Furman, Jonah like in the Bible, Furman, Furman. Wherever you want to find me,
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison. This is News Talk 770 AM, 92.5 FM, WVNN. News starts now.
In an unexpected turn, the Senate voting today to call witnesses in the impeachment trial of former President Trump, delaying a verdict. Representative Jamie Herrera Butler of Washington could be called to testify after she confirmed that House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy was on the phone with Trump, pleading with him to tell supporters to stand down during the insurrection. Herrera Butler says Trump replied rioters were more upset about the election than McCarthy was. House Manager Jamie Raskin before the vote.
We would be prepared to proceed by Zoom deposition of an hour or less, just as soon as Congresswoman Herrera Butler is available, and to then proceed to the next phase of the trial, including the introduction of that testimony shortly thereafter.
Senate leadership huddling, trying to figure out how the trial proceeds from here. Trump's lawyers insisting the former president is innocent, dismissing the impeachment effort as an act of, quote, political vengeance. With continuing coverage, the impeachment trial. I'm Dave Packer, ABC News.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time, but the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maple, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtandj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms. People across Alabama are hurting. Elected leaders have bailed out corporations while sending only a one-time cash payment to working families despite record unemployment and a public health crisis. Hometown Action is fighting for working people across Alabama to build inclusive and sustainable small town and rural communities. Hometown Action demands that Congress pass a people's bailout that expands health care, sends cash payments to families, and invests in green jobs to restart the economy. Now is the time to act. Learn more at www.hometownaction.org. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by listeners like you. If you value the work that we are doing, injecting a different perspective into talk radio, and you have the means, consider signing up for a monthly donation on patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. Again, that's patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report to support our work and keep us on the air.
The Dale Jackson Show, a safe space for terrible people. Weekdays, 7 to 11 a.m., only on WVNN. WVNN.
Put it there, boy. We'll show these fascists what a couple of hillbillies can do.
Right, folks, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host David Story. We just wrapped up an interview with Jonah Furman. He is former labor organizing for Bernie Sanders and AOC. Currently, he runs a newsletter on Substack.com called Who Gets the Bird? It is very good, very good. They're going over all the new union organizing, new strikes, new votes, leadership elections. He wrote a really good piece about the Firefighters International leadership battle a while back. Good stuff. Jonah's awesome. Jonah's very, very, very good. Really enjoyed the conversation.
And you're not going to come across a nicer person in the you know, other than Max. Max is a great guy.
Max is very nice.
Amicable, doesn't say a bad word about anybody. Jonah follows in, or I don't want to say follows in his footsteps, but follows in that same vein of
very
just super nice guy.
Very into camaraderie and good
solidarity.
Things, solidarity. Very big fans. So, you know, we don't talk about politics just a whole lot, but there are some bills that are going through that we wanted to talk about, and one. So the first one that I wanted to talk about, which really, really grinds my gears, and especially the way that I hear it presented here on the station most of the time. I talked to Dale about it on Thursday morning. It was SB 30. What this bill does is, the crux of the bill is it makes it more difficult for workers to prove that their employer behaved negligently. Okay, the proponents of the bill are telling you it doesn't protect negligence. It doesn't. It ties to health guidelines. Blah 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 blah. And like, sure, that's the text. The text of the bill says that, but right below that, it increases the burden of proof from preponderance of evidence to clear and convincing, or clear and compelling, I can never remember. But it increases the burden of proof. So functionally, literally, factually, if you have a negligent employer, it is more difficult to hold them accountable than it was Wednesday before Governor Ivey signed this bill into law. There's a couple other problems with it. One is that it does not tie to federal health guidelines. It ties to local and state guidelines. Now, there's not a,
which we all know is a joke.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't believe that there's just a whole lot of difference in there. But if we want to actually say we're going to tie it to health guidelines, let's tie it to all of them so that we've got all of our bases covered. Secondly, the bill is not actually consistent. If you read the text of the bill, which I encourage everyone to do, then there are two places where it sets forward these liability protections. In one place, it ties it to local and state public health guidance. In the second, it does not. It does not tie to local and state public health guidance in the second place. And Alabama Arise, which is a very good group, everybody should follow their work. Follow Robin Hayden on Twitter. We talked to her on a midweek live stream a couple of weeks ago now. They said that they reached out to a bunch of trial lawyers, and they said, could this be interpreted as giving blanket immunity? Could it be interpreted as they don't have to actually prove that they followed public health guidance because it's inconsistent? And the trial lawyers said, yes, this bill, if it is passed as written, which it was, there was no amendments on the floor and no amendments prior to Governor Ivey signing it. So it is the bill that we talked about, Robin and I, on our live stream a couple weeks ago. I encourage everyone to watch it. The bill that was signed is inconsistent. It has inconsistent language, and it does not consistently tie the boss's behavior to public health guidelines. And so trial lawyers believe that you could easily interpret that, and a defendant could make a case that they didn't actually have to follow public health guidance.
You're being too nice. I mean, the fact that you use the word inconsistent with Senator Orr, because it's Senator Orr that wrote this bill, it's very consistent, and anybody that deals with contract language understands when there's ambiguity in the contract language,
it goes to the boss.
Yep, and well, not just the boss. I mean, look, it's a lose-lose situation. They gave the workers absolutely nothing to fall back on. For example, and there was something that I tweeted about earlier in the week. For example, you've got literally hundreds and thousands of elderly workers that may be at Walmart, that may be at some of your grocery stores, that's interacting with the public on a daily basis. The bill forces them to continue to coming into work regardless of what they think, or quit, as opposed and a lot of these workers are supplementing their income because we don't have a robust Social Security system to take care of workers once they decide to retire. They're supplementing their income with these jobs, whether it be part-time or full-time, and instead of putting some type of fallback and saying if you believe it's unsafe, then you can continue to claim unemployment insurance, or they will have to bring you back as an employee once
everything is
it speaks to the fact of what Republicans in this state have consistently
and Democrats,
done.
More Democrats voted for this bill than voted against it. What the hell?
It speaks, I mean, you're right. It speaks to what we have seen in this state as far as legislation goes, is always looking out for the business and not giving a damn about the small working people anywhere.
Well,
anywhere.
and like folks that are
now,
listening.
Chris England, let's be clear.
England,
Chris England
and like three others.
Sister down in I think Mobile. I can't
Figures.
No, it wasn't Figures. I think it was Karina. I can't remember her name because of course we're not from the South, so we don't keep up with representatives in down
4
South.
Democrats in the House, 1 Democrat in the Senate.
Yeah.
5 Democrats total. We've got 30-something in our state legislature, and 5 of them voted against it. And Anthony Daniels, he's supposed to be the House Minority Leader of the Democratic Party in the House. Apparently he supported it. Now, did he go down there and actually vote for it and put his money where his mouth is? No, he was absent during that vote, so that way, presumably, he doesn't have to take the flack for it later. But apparently, he's been coming on this station and promoting this bill. But I mean, he owns a business, so there you go. But folks, I want you to think critically about this. These bills are being pushed all across the country. All across the country. They're being pushed by powerful interests, corporate lobbying groups. They're saying we need this protection in order to be able to function because frivolous lawsuits from our greedy and lazy workers are going to make us bankrupt if we don't get these protections. All these powerful groups, you have not seen nor heard one case, not even one case that they're putting forward and saying, this is the proof case, this is why we need this legislation. There's not one instance of a worker filing a frivolous lawsuit that they can point to, not one instance of a consumer filing a frivolous lawsuit that cost them money and made them go bankrupt, not one.
We've got numerous cases of people dying.
Yeah, no evidence that workers are engaging in frivolity with regards to their safety or consumers with regard to their safety. There has been no case put forward by the business community for the necessity of this legislation. None whatsoever. And they expect us, the workers, the consumers, to believe that this is in all of our best interest. It's horse crap. It's horse crap, okay? They don't care about you. And here's the bottom line. This is what we've been saying on Twitter. The more Democrats voted for this than against it, okay? So politicians aren't going to protect you. You cannot count on the politicians in Montgomery to protect you. Republican or Democrat, the best way to ensure that your safety is protected at work with regards to the coronavirus or anything else is to form a union and get a contract, get it in writing, and that way you've got a real mechanism to hold them accountable. Because if you're reliant on the laws that are passed in Montgomery by the Republican Party and by the Democratic Party, you are not going to be safe. Yep. That's the bottom line. You just can't. You can't count on these people. You can't count on them. You've got to stand up for yourself. You got to stand up for your brothers and sisters on the job, in your community. That's the way to make your life better, to ensure your safety, to ensure that you've got a good compensation, a good retirement, good health care. I mean, look, we talk politics and we talk who good politicians, bad politicians. Chris England has been against this and he's been forceful against it, and that's good. I appreciate Chris England and the people that were against it and that fought against it. I very much sincerely do, but they don't have enough power to protect us. Yeah. We've got to protect ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, there's so much to look at over the past year with people dying, with the workers dying in South Dakota at the meatpacking plant, at the Tyson plant, where the managers was gambling on who was going to get it, how many people were going to get it.
Yeah, I mean, somebody asked me, where's the evidence that businesses are putting their employees in harm's way? And I'm like, what? Are you do you live in the same world that the rest of us do?
They live in a bubble.
It's insane.
This is what happens when you watch Fox News every day. Those things aren't getting reported like what we see. But I mean, basically they've tied the workers' hands and said, you know, we're not going to allow you to do anything that would injure these businesses, even at the risk of your death.
Yeah,
and that's not hyperbolic. That is absolute fact. We've seen it for the past year, and we're going to continue seeing it so long as this is surrounding us, and it's going to get worse because of legislation like this. I looked at it, I read through it. I didn't read in depth, but I honestly question if this is even constitutional. Can the state of Alabama take away a constitutional right of the redress of grievances? Yeah. I don't know that it can, but the problem is, it goes back to the same thing that it always has. If you don't have the money to fight it, then there's nothing that you can do. Workers simply don't have the money to appeal these cases through the state judicial system to the state Supreme Court and on to the U.S. Supreme Court. They know that there's no way that anybody can come up with the funds to fight this. All you can hope for is maybe the ACLU will take up a case and push it forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's really concerning, you got to do a union about it. I mean, that's the you got.
It goes back to the same thing we're always saying: build worker power. Don't rely on politicians.
And the
we've
more
relied on politicians for entirely too long.
And the more that we build worker power, the more that we're going to be able to, like Jonah said, contest this in the political arena. When we have a union density rate in the state of 15, 20, 30% again, then politicians are going to have to start paying attention to workers. And when they have to start paying attention to workers, then you're not going to get terrible legislation like this passed. I mean, there's some other legislation. You've got that wiretapping bill. These supposedly small government conservatives want the government to be able to, surveil you at their whim if they reckon that you're trafficking in drugs.
The same ones that's being censored.
Yeah,
those same ones that hate big tech, but they don't mind wiretapping.
Yeah, I don't know. And there's this one about the transgender youth that is really, really problematic. Because I don't think people understand like the transgender health care that actually happens when the person is a minor. For one, nothing is given to a minor that is actually irreversible. The puberty blockers are not irreversible; they're completely reversible, and those are only given after like tens and tens of months of consultation with professional therapists, and they're going to make this kind of health care illegal, and people could go to prison for this. There was a police officer that actually testified against it that has a transgender daughter, and he said, you're asking me to put cuffs on my heroes, and that was a really heartbreaking testimony. And it also makes it required by law for a healthcare professional or an educator or a counselor to tell a child's parents if the child expresses any inclination towards being transgender. And we know here in Alabama that can really put people in danger. There are people that are like people are still in Alabama kicked out just for being gay. Made homeless. Like this is, and to make educators bring that to their parents' attention without the proper thinking through it, it's just not safe. It is not safe at all. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
The Valley Labor Report is also supported by listeners like you. If you value the work that we are doing, injecting a different perspective into talk radio, and you have the means, consider signing up for a monthly donation on patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. Again, that's patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report to support our work and keep us on the air. People across Alabama are hurting. Elected leaders have bailed out corporations while sending only a one-time cash payment to working families despite record unemployment and a public health crisis. Hometown Action is fighting for working people across Alabama to build inclusive and sustainable small town and rural communities. Hometown Action demands that Congress pass a people's bailout that expands health care, sends cash payments to families, and invests in green jobs to restart the economy. Now is the time to act. Learn more at www.hometownaction.org. The American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE Local 1858, believes all workers are entitled to fairness, dignity, and respect. AFGE also knows that the best way to guarantee proper treatment is for workers to stand together, united, looking out for each other. In AFGE, we fight for workers every day to ensure a workplace that is safe and free from harassment. If you're a federal employee and want to be a part of this union, to protect yourself and your fellow workers, call 256-876-4880. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years. providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time, but the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maple, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtandj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
WVNN.
Folks, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host David Story. This is the last segment for February 13th, 2021. You can hear the show again if you go to YouTube. You can search YouTube for the Valley Labor Report. You can also hear us, and if you drive down to Russellville, you can hear us on WGOL, and you can hear us. We're on all of your favorite podcasting apps. You can go there. Don't forget to go to the Necessities Drive today, 3 to 5 p.m., and every Saturday, held by the North Alabama DSA at the IBEW Local Union Hall on Clinton Avenue, across from Yellowhammer and Campus 805. They're doing good work there. And you know, if you want to support the show, patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. It really helps. We're getting a pretty wide reach now. Our friend on Twitter, Rocket City QC, has told me that he's in the DSA and he's been on some of their restaurant organizing projects, and he said one of the folks up in Minneapolis listens to us regularly. I think he said his name was Paul KD. So we're
we picked up. I mean, one of the guys contacted us last week. Was where was he? He was from Minneapolis as well.
Oh, was it? Who was that? They reached out to us.
Clint, yeah.
Clint, no, Massachusetts. Wasn't it Massachusetts nurses?
Yeah. He's up north.
Something like that. He's a Yank. Yeah, so we're getting out there.
Nice guy though.
Nice guy. We're getting out there. The message is getting out there, even beyond the Tennessee Valley. And so, what we really would like to do with the show is we would like to grow. We're on WVNN and WGOL now. We would really like to be able to be heard on Saturday mornings everywhere, Saturday or Sunday morning, everywhere in the Tennessee Valley. And we can, this costs money. We've got to pay the station every month. And so
we volunteer our time.
Our time. We are not making any money on this because we're volunteering our time to do this because we reckon the message is important. So if you support what we're doing, supporting us on Patreon would really, really help secure, stable financials. That way we're not so dependent on advertisers right now. Advertisers make up, I would say, something on the order of 70% of our revenue right now. So being less dependent on advertisers would really, really help. And getting more support will help us break into other. Do what?
That's the biggest thing. We want to
really break into other markets.
And one in the Shoals and two in Birmingham.
Yeah, we'd like to. Yeah, we'd like to be in Birmingham, Montgomery, the Shoals, Nashville, Memphis, all over the Tennessee Valley and Alabama. We would love to do that. So patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report is where you can go to support us if you are so inclined. So we're just going to wrap up talking about some of the other legislation. Not all of it's bad. They passed a coronavirus tax relief, which says that Alabama taxes are not going to be taken from the relief checks and from the unemployment stimulus, which is good. That is great. I support that. That's good stuff. A not good thing that they're doing that is just really weird is they're making the Star Spangled Banner be played in schools once a week. That's so weird. And I'm not like an anti-patriotic person. I'm actually much more patriotic than a typical lefty. I fly a flag outside of my duplex. I actually, I bought the flag. I installed it myself. I wear.
What?
Yeah. I bought the flag, installed it myself. Drilled into the brick there. And you know, that's because, like, I reckon that, you know, my sense of America and Alabama is that, like, we have a history of racism and fascism and patriarchy, like, down to our roots, right? Like, it is in the DNA of America. But also in the DNA of America is the revolutionary spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, the Black Panthers, the Young Patriots Organization, the Rainbow Coalition fights, Eugene Debs fights for justice and equality and fairness and worker power also go down to the roots of America. And so, like, I think that legacy is good. And, you know, I think that sometimes folks on the left maybe we stress the bad and we kind of forget the good, and we forget that it's all tangled up in the same legacy. And so we can, you know, I think we can be proud of the legacy of the United States, and I am, but like, and like, it's weird that the Star Spangled Banner is like the first thing that comes into my mind. A lot of times I'll kind of idly like just sing a tune, and the Star Spangled Banner is like the first thing that comes to my mind. So I just run around my house singing the Star Spangled Banner. But like, making people do things like that's just weird. Like, it's weird to me. I have never understood the inclination to do that. Never understood the inclination to, like, force people to do things that they don't want to do. And it's so weird to me. I can't wrap my mind around it. It's weird. It's like this kind of authoritarian mentality. Like, we've got to control the way people think. We've got to control the way people feel. And I'm just not about that. Like, if I've got an idea that I reckon is good, you know, I want to win in the battle of ideas. I want to win in the marketplace of ideas, so to speak. And these authoritarian kind of people, like, they want to, like, you know, force these thoughts into our heads and force patriotism into people's hearts, and you can't do that. And forcing it on people.
You can. They are.
Yeah, well, they're trying, but I mean, and they can make people do like the physical things, but I don't think you can. I think that forcing people to do that actually does harm to putting the pride of country in your heart. It makes you less. It makes you less inclined to be proud of your country, I think, when you're forced to show this symbolic patriotism and it doesn't actually come from your heart. It's like the same with church, you know, like you can't force real Christianity or a real religion on somebody. Like, it's got to come from their heart. And I think generally Christians kind of understand that. But a lot of times they kind of lose that when it comes to patriotism. They reckon that they can just force people to think a certain way, and it doesn't. I don't think it doesn't work like that.
Well, there's a reason, and I'm very you know, I've said it numerous times. There's a reason I don't use Nazi and fascism on our show much, because it's so overused by the liberals, the liberal media, the Democrats in general. But there's a reason why they're using that term as well, and it's because of laws like this, where you see a right-wing legislature trying to push nationalism on everyone. And I'm not, and like you, I'm not against the Star Spangled Banner. I'm not against prayer in school. There's never been a ban on prayer in school. Anybody that wants to pray in school can pray in school, but to force people to pray in school, or to force people, I mean, it's at what point do you decide which prayer is right? You know, the Hail Satan documentary proved the point that when you start opening the door up to these things, then all of a sudden it opens the door up for anybody else to do the same thing, and it's terrible. It sets terrible precedent, because at some point, right now, everyone believes that this is a Christian nation, and I'm not saying that it's not, but at some point you lose that popularity, and then what happens? Well, then are you going to be forced to pray somebody to and nothing against Jewish people, but are you going to be forced to pray to a Jewish God? Are you going to be forced to recite the menorah and things like this?
Yeah, well, I mean, even in a Christian majority country, you're going to have Islamic people in your schools, you're going to have Jewish people in your schools, you're going to have pagans in your schools, and like obviously we would balk at you know, about being made,
no matter who it is.
Yeah, being made
made to listen like listen to these things. Like, obviously no one's going to stop Muslims from praying in school, and we need to make space for that. We need to make space for Christians to pray in school. I remember studying the Bible during my breaks in school, in high school at some points, and like no one ever got on to me for that. But like forcing this onto people is just so weird, and we've got to get out of that authoritarian kind of mentality. It's just real weird. Folks, we are going to be back next week. This is the Valley Labor Report. Make sure you're following us online.
WVNN Athens, WVNN FM Trinity, a Cumulus station. It's 11 o'clock. News starts now.
From ABC News, I'm Dave Packer. An unexpected turn in the impeachment trial of former President Trump. By a vote of 55 to 45, the Senate voting to allow witnesses, 5 Republicans joining Democrats.